everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio Podcast, a podcast that specializes in horological hot takes, taboo topics, and often unpopular watch opinions. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Schmidt, and you obviously know my co-host, my good friend, Bro Dinky. Bro, what's going on, my friend?
Not a whole lot. Had a pretty good week. Starting back with the Super Bowl, hit a couple boxes and things, so walked away with some cash.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Can't complain about that. Other than that, I've been kind of just going down a very weird rabbit hole of vintage, I guess, dress Seikos, kind of. A lot of Lord Marvel, Grand Courts, Lord Matic, stuff like that. Kind of the predecessor Grand Seiko type deal.
You're kind of circling the drain. See, this is what happens when you get that little King Seiko teaser. Now you're just spiraling.
Yeah, I've been looking at everything. It's a sickness, I have to say.
So did you decide what you think you're gonna get to commemorate your promotion?
Not yet.
Okay.
I feel like we got some major drops coming out in the next few months. So
yeah, it might behoove you to be patient. I guess.
Or to make that decision a little tougher. So that's cool.
Yeah. So have we? I mean, I honestly haven't done it. I know, kind of March, April time is when everything really starts dropping. But have we seen if there any of the big shows are coming back? Like, is SIHH coming back or Geneva Days, or do you know? I honestly don't.
I haven't heard anything, and I really don't know. I mean, even before the pandemic became really a newsworthy thing, I feel like people said that those shows were kind of going by the wayside. Yeah. Specifically Baselworld, which sucks.
Yeah, well,
as corny as it was, I really enjoyed Baselworld. I really liked kind of seeing the behind the scenes stuff and then having everybody kind of deliver their own pitch on all the new stuff. It was a lot of fun, and also reading about $14 hot dogs.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was cool for a lot of people because there was this allure of like, this is the show, this is where everything happens, and you knew everyone was going to debut their novelties at that time. So it was kind of like this was the mass concentration. It's like this time in March, April, boom, Basel happens. Everyone's releasing their stuff. It's all at one time. It's going to be all over the blogs, instantaneously. I remember back in the day when I was still heavily in the industry. I mean, I would wake up at 5 a.m., to do the time conversion and everything to see what was coming out because everyone's going to start posting their stuff at 11, 12, 1 o'clock, right, in Switzerland. So it was huge. But the thing with Basel, what was crazy is they just started getting so ridiculously expensive for all the retailers to start really going. And especially after they rebuilt the Basel convention center, because I don't know if you saw this. They had a different location before, or they heavily renovated it. And I kind of heard that they, again, I don't know how true this is, but I kind of heard that they were strong arming people for stuff, and basically the people who funded Baselworld were just hostile taking over money and charging people out the nose to be on site. And they even had this giant Vacheron clock made outside the building, this egregious luxury stuff for no reason, right? And it's let's be honest, it's a trade show. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Vendors come, they present their stuff, people take orders, and then they go back and they deliver the product. So I think from that aspect, it started to feel antiquated because it wasn't really a direct consumer thing. But I don't know. Is there a new Baselworld coming?
I'm not sure, and I don't know what they're gonna do with Watches and Wonders or whatever. But I was just
Baselworld. See, that's the thing.
I liked it because it was like the first day of March Madness. So, when you fill out your bracket and there's 85 games on, and then you don't know which way to look on all the TV screens. That was always my favorite day of the sports year. Baselworld was always my favorite day of the watch year.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. It says Baselworld organizers have decided to take more time for the launch of a new concept. Baselworld, scheduled for spring 2022, will therefore not take place. Sweet. There's your answer. I can't imagine that they're going to limp this along that much longer. I really don't know how much they can hold out. Because now you have other stuff you have SIHH, which is kind of becoming more mainstream, but I know that was mostly for Richemont brands.
Yeah.
And then you had, Geneva Days, which is kind of this new thing, which was kind of everybody. and everyone, it was kind of like a mini version of Basel. So I mean, I don't know what the heck they're gonna do. So I guess we'll find out. But I know things are coming down the pipe, I'm sure. So it'll be exciting to see what comes out. Maybe something will catch your eye.
Yeah. Speaking of things coming out, just to hop on the back of something I had mentioned last episode when we were talking about the Seiko 5 generic diver looking thing.
Yeah.
I had mentioned Warren Wine was coming out with that Seiko 5 edition. They just dropped it today.
Yeah, they
It's
did.
Thursday today, so it dropped today. People are going to hear this on Monday, but
Yeah.
kind of an interesting little release. But they didn't go with that diver, which made me happy because that thing sucks. They went with the more
Yeah.
military-esque Seiko.
Yeah, it's kind of like the faithful revival of the is it SNK, I think it was,
Yeah.
or SKN, I
Yes.
think, from the old days. Like that was one of the
SNK.
SNK, right? Like that was one of the first watches I ever owned. That was an automatic once I really started getting into it. So back then you could buy them on Amazon for like $80. I
Yep.
remember the good old days. Um, but I had the black dial one, and I remember watching that review from Warren and Wound like so many years ago, and I got hooked, and so I ordered one just based on that. So, to your point, I am glad they didn't do the, as you called it last time, the Fugazi diver, which I think might be a name that sticks. Who knows? People, I've seen it been used this week, so I think it's catching on. But the Fugazi
Nice.
Seiko diver, but I actually really like this new field watch design. Like even the standard model, not the worn and wound version, but like the standard version, I actually really like. And I think the size is good because I think it's 38, 39 now. Because the other one was like really small, like 36 or 35. It's pretty small. But this new version just looks good. And I like the handset. It's kind of like these like flared out sword kind of looking hands. So I don't know, man. At $275, it's not a bad value prop.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen I think there's a PVD version with orange accents.
That one looks sick.
Yeah, it does. I want to see
I'm,
that
I'm
in
not gonna
person
lie,
because
like it looks sick.
PVD can be a little iffy. I want to see that one in person, but I like that. And I also like, here's a pro tip for everybody out there, Seiko heads like myself. They release these watches with an American reference number. You can find the analogous Japanese reference number and then just go to one of the Sakura, Nomon, whatever, and get one with a kanji day wheel, which looks A1. That's what I do
Yeah,
on all my Seikos.
because that's what One and Wound did, right? Like their date wheels in Japanese,
Yeah. Yes.
which is kind of cool. Like I wouldn't know what date it is, but it's kind of cool
This
to.
guy does.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. You say go ahead. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool. Just from like, if I was going to add a piece to a collection that I wanted to be distinctly Japanese like that, that would be a cool watch to have with the kanji date wheel. That'd be sick. That'd be sick. So in other news, another watch that came out earlier this week that I absolutely love, and now it's giving me heart palpitations, is that new Longines, the Legend Diver extension. They added all the new colorways. Man, there's that Bordeaux. There's like this new like sand khaki color and that gray kind of gradient dial.
It's like a gray blue.
Oh God, I'm like
Looks
God,
good.
like God dang it! Like seriously,
The minute I saw that, I had to send that to you. I was like,
I know you did.
Bing.
And it was funny because you sent it to me and another collector friend of mine sent it to me within like 30 seconds. So like when you sent it, I got a bing and then I got another bing like immediately after. And it was the same post. And I'm like, guys, you know me too well. It's like when I have multiple friends sending me a new Legend Diver, like I'm already in trouble. But no, I really do like them. I hope they'll be successful for Longines. I imagine that they will, because the colors just look good, and it gives some more character to that retro diver, which you guys already know I love so much. So
Definitely, definitely. All right, I guess into this week's topic.
yeah,
This week, I guess I wanted to do a little bit of a reflective episode, sort of from the point of view of us as, and I will use this term loosely, content creators.
yeah,
I always like to reflect when I listen to the episodes back. I do the editing, so I'm listening to it then. I usually give it one more at least that week. It gives me time to kind of stew on what we're putting out. And I feel like you're always your own worst critic. And
yeah.
a lot of times, even when you get done with an episode, maybe you feel like, oh, that was kind of hot garbage. And then you listen to it back and you're like, it's actually decent. Or people will say, wow, I really enjoyed that. You're like, I didn't think it was our best work.
Yeah.
Which
We
does,
go through the cycles, guys. Believe me, as bro hinted last time, it's not easy to do
like
this. So
weekly. That's
sometimes,
like a weekly cycle.
yeah. So sometimes we're like, hey, okay, so I was garbage this week, so maybe next week I'll be less garbage. If you're like, no, this is a great episode. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad somebody enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things like everybody hates the sound of their own voice. Right?
Yes,
Like I don't like listening myself back.
especially me last week.
Oh,
I
that was good though.
sounded oh man, it was so bad. I'm glad you didn't scorch me in the comments because I was just like I listened to that episode a few times this past week and I was like, man, I could just hear it, like the change. So today I have a voice, so that's good.
But you like to be taken seriously and put out what you consider worthwhile content. And I feel like that's what we do. And I don't know, I don't have a reference for this, but when I sometimes I see content that is put out by creators and I feel like it's just kind of content for the sake of content, it's sort of where I get lost, right? It's almost like busy work. Like when you were in school, you used to get busy work and it wasn't getting graded, didn't count, but you had to do it. And you're like, well, why? And there was like no rationale for it. That's kind of what I akin that to. And it's more that like, I wish people would take a less cookie cutter approach because what happens is we find a method or a medium that works and then everybody goes to that. They go to that exact format.
Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
And so I think kind of being outside of the box in some way, shape, or form has a lot of merit.
I mean, or at least the attempt to try
to
be outside the box, like, because again, I mean, we have a podcast like a lot of other people that have podcasts. So our medium isn't different, but what we're trying to convey messaging wise is trying to be different and consistently trying to be different. So again, to that point, it's just like, we don't want to put content out there for the sake of just putting out content. I'm not going to send you guys a hot pile of steamy garbage every week for you guys to listen to, because obviously you're not going to want to listen to it. So it should at least be good. And if it's not, please God, DM us and let us know, because or logical hot take, like we can handle it.
Like Old Yeller, just take me out back.
Take me out back.
Plug me.
No, Ma, he's my dog. I'll do it.
Now, part of the reason we made that this show was because there was a bit of a disconnect, at least in my opinion, between your average Joe type watch collector and more of the content that's prevalent today in the digital landscape, at least.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we've started to carve out a little bit of a niche that's off the beaten path, but there's such a wealth of content out there now. And it's so different from what it used to be like, right? Like when I first started collecting watches, it was a lot of information. You had like just talking watches was like the main video that everybody looked forward to.
Yeah.
There wasn't this wealth that there is now.
Yeah.
Right. And I know I was big into talking watches. That was like something that really.
I was too. In many ways, I still am. It's just, again, for us, like, talking watches 10 years ago is very different than talking watches today. Right.
Right. And it captured that social aspect of collecting, which I think is something that you kind of miss, especially when you're first into it. You have no friends that are into it. You've never approached a meetup or a red bar or whatever. And so you've never had those social interactions. So something like a talking watches where you're reaching out to people and relating was like so huge when I was looking that up. It was like really like inspiring. It was something that I wanted to achieve with other collectors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And you could see kind of how that has stemmed into a lot of content that is produced today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Now I feel like we have such a diversity, I guess, of content. You have anything from just blatant entertainment, like something that's you could sit there and just listen to it and it doesn't have to be factual. It doesn't have to be informative. It could just be somebody giving you an opinion. And then all the way to the other side, it could be something humorous. Like it's become so vast.
Yeah.
Where before it was kind of strictly this little machine that goes on your wrist.
And I think a lot of that is just attributed to, the community has attracted different people.
Yeah, that is
so
true.
these different people are looking for different kind of engagement, different kind of content. I'm with you. I mean, like the spectrum has changed so much from what we had before. You know, again, a lot of the stuff when we first started was more informative. It was more stuff that was, you know, based on facts and collecting information stuff to give collectors the opportunity to learn more about what they were looking at or what they were going to be interested in, especially when they couldn't be hands on with something, right? And now there's a lot more kind of like shock and awe, or kind of these like crazy things that get thrown out there that for some people is very entertaining, but I don't know if it's necessarily engaging watch content.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or the hard hitting facts. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because again, I'm not going to step on anybody's game here. But for me, it's just not something that I myself find appealing.
Yeah, and so I guess this episode is going to be somewhat of a perspective on watch related content and kind of how we have come to know it in this space today. So I know I myself have definitely pared back a lot of what I consume in recent years. In the
Same.
beginning, it was kind of just whatever I can get my hands on, I would watch. Now, there's a lot of wrinkles in that, and part of it is I'm just busier overall. Like, obviously, being a dad is a lot of work, having a job, like
Yes.
with a capital J.
Yes.
Part of it is just I think everybody gets a little bit jaded at times. I know I definitely have. I go kind of through ups and downs with it where, we have these narratives and this dogma that kind of sits in our hobby of just like these unwritten rules and things that I don't really subscribe to. And I think that, again, that's kind of why I wound up with the account that I wound up with. But I think it just gets tiresome to see the same things over and over again spelled out in front of your face. Like it just gets tiresome, whether it's hype or whatever. I mean, there's a lot under the umbrella of watch culture. And so I guess it's more just I've also streamlined my intake down to what I get the most value out of and sort of just cut the fat out from what I don't.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And again, I've echoed this before on the podcast. Like you and I think a lot the same.
Yeah.
Even though we're not in an area where we can hang out and do this stuff all the time together. But it's the same thing for me. Like when I first started, I was consuming literally every piece of editorial content, every video, everything that I could digest physically about watches because I wanted to know everything. Then as I started getting more seasoned in this, some of the stuff just became, background noise for me. And it's just like, it wasn't interesting. It wasn't appealing. It was not something that I could overly focus on or wanted to, because it didn't make sense for me as a collector or somebody that was an enthusiast in this. And I just started paring back. And I think, people go through these cycles, especially like with your physical collection, right? Where you just like come to the point where like, I need to offload all of this.
Yes.
Because it's no longer representative of me, right? Or representative of me. And in this case, the same thing is true with what I was consuming. So I think this is a great topic because, I know as quote unquote content creators, which is a very odd title to refer to myself as.
Sure.
But as a content creator, I want to put it out there, kind of the stuff that we jive with, and the stuff that we think is cool, and the stuff that is exciting that maybe you guys that have no exposure to could get some exposure to. So I think that would be pretty cool. So do you want to start it off?
Well, by now I think anybody who themselves is a content creator is probably sweating a little in the palms, but I think you guys can relax. This is not going to be a slanderous episode. This is going to be more of just a breakdown of what we like, what we find value in. So you could take a little solace in that.
Yeah, we're not out here to roast anybody.
But I'll go back to, I guess, when I first got into watches, right? I got very wrapped up in, it's almost like the mystique, like the fanfare involved. I gotta say, like brands and I guess the blogs that promote them also, they did a very, very good job of making it like this magical place. Because when you're on the outside looking in, it's sort of like a weird world. It's like a lot of mechanical knowledge, and then there's all these different brands from different countries that you can't pronounce. But once you get your foot in the door, it's like a whirlwind, right? It's like there's this huge ecosystem of all these different brands and all these different personalities and who's attached to what. And then there's the whole tradition and honor and prestige that each one carries. And it goes beyond the concept of just being jewelry or tools. And I think that was a big latching on point for myself and for many people, is that you get kind of swept up in it, right?
Yeah.
It
You
becomes
get carried
this
away.
whole, it's kind of that art angle. Oh, it's art, which is really kind of lame, but at the same time, you're like, wow, you see your first guilloche dial and you're like, oh, that is kind of artsy. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. And so it kind of reminded me of you remember the first Jurassic Park?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, where he brings him in and all of a sudden Old Man Hammond, he goes, welcome to Jurassic Park. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
all the dinosaurs are just everywhere. And I remember that vividly being a kid in whatever year that was, like 94, 95.
Yeah.
And, after he says that, everything just pops out. It's every time you turn your head, it's just a different, like, new marvel.
A different animal. Yeah.
and
You see the giant brontosaurus walking across the field and you're like, holy crap. Like, and you're seeing it for the first time. Yeah, exactly.
right, that was the feeling for me. I was a
It's that moment of
29-year-old
wonder.
kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that moment of wonder. It's that moment of experiencing something that's new and different for the very first time. And it's the feeling that you're experiencing this for yourself, because that's the other thing too. I think that's interesting about watches is when you first kind of stick that key in the door and you unlock it and you open the door, you make the choice to step through. A lot of times when you do that, you're stepping through by yourself.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, I've talked about this before. Like, I had literally nobody in my family, in my friends, anybody that I knew in my passing life, nothing that were into watches. I got into watches myself because I thought it was cool. And like yourself, bro, I mean, we were in a situation where, liking watches for most people was weird. And everyone's like, why and how much do these things cost? Why are you spending this kind of money? Like, it didn't make sense. So it's interesting.
I just remember you see first watch worn on the moon, and you're like, oh, damn, right? The watch that summited Everest, depending on which watch you actually think that is. James Bond. And it's funny because obviously from playing GoldenEye and growing up as a kid in the 90s, you knew what watch you wore. I mean, I didn't know what Omega was, but I could pick that watch out.
Well, yeah. I mean, every time you hit the start button too in the game, you would pull the menu would come up with his watch, right? Like, it was so sick, Oh man, but it's that whole thing that, like, all of these things were working together and you finally kind of get introduced into it. So it's a feeling, that I know all too well. And I think every collector that's probably listening to this has experienced that in one form or another, for themselves as well. So I think this resonates. So
right.
What do you got?
Well, from there, I think it goes down into the abyss, right? You go into the brand stories, historical significance. And that was, I guess, the type of content that really hooked me first was, I felt like I gravitated to those backstories, and I got to learn and appreciate the different brands historically. And I think it encourages me to do more deep dives into brands.
Okay.
Those type of those cool stories, whether it be from hearing who in history owned a watch or what endeavors it went on, right? And that was kind of what led me to my love of Seiko. Was I didn't know anything about the history of the brand. I thought it was just a Japanese watch brand who made this specific design language. I went back and I looked at all the historical achievements they have made, and I was like, damn, these guys are like a real player. This wasn't just these aren't just some people who made this homely little watch company and then it grew. This is significant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
There's substance there, like there's tangibles and intangibles, right? And these intangibles are like all the background information, the stories, the romantic element of the brands, the watches themselves. And that's the stuff that really starts to sink into you. And once its claws are in your back, man, it's really hard to take it out.
Right. And then this has always been interesting to me because I was on Watch You Seek one time and I saw this topic pop up and it immediately got closed. And it was about history of brands, but the person posed this question and he was saying, yeah, believe it or not, this is actually a conversation I had with somebody else who is, whether you call him a listener, friend of the show, Sean. I think you've met him before, but he was talking to me about how much I like Seiko, and he asked me if I had any feelings about their relationship with the Japanese military in the 40s, during the World War II era. And
Yeah.
thinking about it, right, there's probably a lot of brands that are still around today that were significant in a lot of European countries during that time,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And so this thread got shut down immediately. They're like, we're not talking about this, whatever, whatever. And I thought that was kind of lame. Like I felt like if people were going to be mature, it's an interesting conversation to have.
Well, and again, like I know where this goes, and the fact that somebody did shut it down is kind of lame because it's like, guys, we can all be honest, we can all be mature. It's like just because Seiko supplied watches to the Japanese fighters during World War II does not mean that Seiko hates the world. Like, I mean, the same thing is true with
Yeah.
IWC and Panerai.
Panerai.
I mean, like these watches were supplied to the Axis powers. Like, does that mean that IWC is somehow trying to rekindle Hitler's Third Reich? No, that's ridiculous. They're just a watch company. They got wrapped up in something that they really probably didn't have an option to get out of. Okay. So I mean, like, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Like, they supply watches the Axis powers. Like, who cares? Like,
and I
let's
know
move
I
on.
know it opens up a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but I think they're
Sure.
worth having. And
Absolutely.
I
If you're
think-
mature, you can have it.
yeah, and because I think we all find the military histories of these watches interesting, and that they were actual tools and they had actual applications.
Yeah.
And I understand that it can be tough to show praise for that while also not trying to sound like you're glorifying one of the worst alliances of all time. But I think even our own country, I think it's had its downfalls as well as many others. And even so, you could still appreciate artistry and craftsmanship from those eras without maybe attaching a political asterisk to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
But so these were the type of content that I gravitated to. And
Yeah.
when I think about that now, generally who I see right in that context, I think a lot of like a Cole Pennington.
Yeah.
I feel like his work is very passionate. Like I feel like it comes from a genuine interest. He's like immersed himself in that, and that appeals to me. He's always usually in his wheelhouse, usually talking about some kind of a vehicle or cultural exploration, but when he touches on those poignant topics, right? He does it judiciously, which I think you have to do.
Well, I mean, the thing is with Cole, I mean, the guy's a huge nerd. And I mean that
in the best way.
Yeah. I mean that completely as a term of endearment. And that's honestly why I love reading his articles so much, because they are extremely immersive. He's extremely knowledgeable about watches, cars, diving, all kinds of things. The guy is in many ways a modern Renaissance man. Like, he's traveling, he is traveled. This guy goes everywhere. I think him and his girlfriend, I think, is who I see in the photos. And they're like jet setting around doing crazy stuff. Like, he was, in Asia for like
fishing
4 months.
in Southeast Asia.
The guy's crazy, but that's why his content is cool. He's kind of like an Anthony Bourdain for watches. That's kind of the vibe I get from him. It's like no borders. Like, I'm just going to go do cool things. I'm going to talk about it, report about it, and write some cool articles, and you guys can read it or don't read it. And I enjoy reading it because it comes from a place of authenticity. It's exciting. You're living vicariously through his words. And to me, that's really cool. So, Cole, if you ever do listen to this podcast, I know you and Bro have talked before. I know you and Bro have had words before. You and I have never, but keep doing what you're doing, brother, because that is something that I really vibe with. And I think it's amazing what you do.
But so I have talked to him about times where parts of war and stuff have come into play. And he's mentioned about how you kind of have to tiptoe around it, and appropriately so.
Yeah.
On the other hand, somebody who doesn't like to do that is our boy Jose Periscope, right? Who's an absolute savage, right?
That guy does not pull any punches, and he will totally roast Panerai for its Nazi German ties.
That
it's kind of funny.
His Rolex deep sea. He does his like busting situations, but when he's got a juicy scoop, right? He thinks it's 100% accurate. He just goes straight for the jugular, right?
And I think you kind of need both. You need both.
Yeah,
right?
It's a great balance.
Jose's a polarizing figure, but I also love him for that, because he like you said, he pulls no punches, and what he writes, he is going to write authentically, but he only puts it out there if he can verify it. Right. That is the one thing that I know about him. He's very good, but he only puts out content when it's 100% without refuting verifiable. And that's why there's been so many scandals, like in the, the auction houses and all that stuff too. So, it's funny. I actually had Jose on my list as well, and he kind of beat me to it. But Jose is somebody that I have a lot of respect for because of the thoroughness of his research. If you've never gone to periscope.com and read his articles about Panerai origin stories, or Rolex is being issued to the military, the Omega Ploprof and Comex, like all the stuff that he's covered, you need to do it. The guy is a certifiable encyclopedia, and his stuff is, I don't even know the best way to describe it. It's so detail oriented. It's insane. And the guy's good at what he does. Controversial, but good at what he does.
But I think it's the passion and the thoroughness for both guys that is what I gravitate to as far as a blog goes.
Yeah.
Something that I want to read consistently.
Yeah. Because they make it fun. They make it enjoyable. And there's that element of intrigue and capturing and stuff like that just, again, it's enticing. I would have to say, by that same token, somebody that I had on my own personal list for this as a content creator is Marshall from Wristwatch Revival. I know I've touched on him a little bit already in the podcast a few episodes back. But guys, if you have not gone to YouTube and followed this dude, you need to. His videos are awesome. And he just sounds like, I've never met him. I've never conversed with him at all. I doubt he even listens to this podcast and even knows that I'm talking about him. But I will say this, that guy has so much passion for watchmaking, so much passion for horology and preservation of historical watches, that it just comes through in the best way in his videos. All he does is sits down on the bench, films in 4K video, and does a watch service in front of you for like an hour. And it is the coolest thing, because not only is it him, kind of restoring a piece, but he's talking about it systematically. He's talking about how things function, the mechanics, why you do certain things. It's all the stuff that you wanted to know about watchmaking, but we're too afraid to ask a watchmaker. And he's doing it in front of you. And the guy has incredible video content. He's got a Patreon page, so if you wanted to support him, you could certainly do that as well. But the guy is just genuinely passionate about watches. And it makes me, as somebody who has a passing fancy into like how movements work and the understanding of the complexities of and the inner workings of movements, which I find incredibly interesting. I think most of you guys that listen to a watch podcast probably would as well. It's really cool to see it firsthand. So I think Marshall's got 197,000 followers or subscribers right now on YouTube, which is a lot. His videos get hundreds of thousands of views. But if you don't follow him already, go follow him, dude. His stuff is awesome. If you don't have a full hour to dedicate to watching it when you're typing out emails at work, just put it on the TV in the background, listen to it like a podcast.
ASMR.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, and there is an ASMR element to it when you hear him like click, mainsprings in place and remove cannon pinions, like all this stuff that he talks about. Like, it's really cool to hear that, and there is an ASMR element because he's like, it's like, oh man, that's the sweet spot, But go give that guy a follow, because he certainly does need to be up to 200,000 subs, but he deserves every minute of it. He's my favorite watch repair person channel on YouTube right now. And not that there's not other good ones out there. I just don't think there's any out there that are of his quality.
Yeah, he's dope. And I guess just before we move on from blogs, I'd like to give credit to the folks over at both Time and Tide and Monochrome, because whenever something new drops, I feel like they always have it first. And I don't know if it's just because they're a little bit ahead in the time zone game or not.
It could be.
Could be. But they always seem to have, when I see or I hear about the drop, and I'm like, I have to find the specs or the price or whatever, they're always the ones that come up first.
Yeah.
So I got to give them credit. And then just, I guess, for general discussion and like philosophy, I guess you want to say, I stick with Fratello. I think they have that lockdown. Yeah. They have just like the best takes on everything.
Yeah, and I think RJ and his team really try to be objectively unbiased as much as they can.
Yeah.
And I think of all the major watch blogs, they're one of the few that really hasn't tried to super monetize their page. Like there's some elements of their stuff, like they have a shop and they sell stuff, but I don't feel like it's thrown in my face as much on with them as it is maybe on other sites. And again, nothing that's bad. It's just I want to read the watch content, I will come back and buy a strap if I really, really want to. I don't need it. I don't need to be reminded 6 times, right? But RJ, and I will say this, I have messaged him back when I had a social media account. I've messaged him, I've DM'd him, we've talked. The guy is approachable and he's an amazingly passionate person, not only about Omega, which is kind of his bread and butter, specifically Speedmaster, no surprise, right? But just watches in general. The guy is super knowledgeable. He's super down to earth. And I know that there's times where I've messaged him where it's probably like 6 a.m. his time, and he'll respond like within minutes. I'm like, dude, are you awake right now? Like you can respond to a guy you've never actually met in person a couple hours from now. Like you don't need to respond like right away, but he's always quick to respond. And the guy's just the nicest, most humble person I've met in a digital format. So yeah, shout out to Fratello team. Like you guys keep kicking butt because I love your content.
Yeah, shout out to my buddy Mike Stockton, who's a fellow Seiko head. He and I
Mike
go back
Stockton,
and forth.
yeah,
good dude. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. There's just not a lot of pretension. It's relatable. It's often in tune with a lot of what's going on. I mean, I don't know if you saw it, and not even that it's necessarily in my wheelhouse, but somebody over there put out an article about how Oris could be the next like Rolex type figure, which again is a gutsy thing to throw out there, but at least it's food for thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That was an article published on Fratello?
Yeah, I swear it was. I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Stockton or RJ. I can't remember who it was, but it's definitely on there.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to go check that out because I missed that.
Yeah,
that's a bold claim, but I mean, if you have evidence to back it up, or you have at least a perspective just like that his makes 2 cents.
I feel like just like comparing how the lineages work and how they tackle different aspects of different styles of watch complications and everything.
Yeah,
but
interesting.
Yeah, and someone over at Fratello might also pitch me an occasional meme once in a while, like a Ghost Rider. But that's for another day.
Dang, you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. Bro does not write all of his own music.
It's like a 99% thing.
There you go.
But every once in a while, somebody throws me a good one, and I gotta share it.
That's awesome.
Speaking of, I guess I'll touch on this one before we leave that. In the realm of memes, right? They've definitely gone mainstream, I guess you'd say, right? They've gotten a lot of recognition, certainly since I've picked them up. I do think they've jumped the shark a little bit, right? I think like the term "jump the shark" comes from Happy Days, where the Fonz jumps over the shark, and basically it was an episode where people realized that the show had kind of taken its turn, right? Like every week there's a new meme account, right? And a lot of it's just recycled stuff, and it might not be on purpose, but it's the same stuff you've already seen, or they're just really, really trying to be edgy and like outlandish.
Yeah.
Right. And I get it. You have to make a splash. I went through that. You have to get views. You have to get shares. But at the same time, like you're going to see, it doesn't sit well with you to be like spiteful or hateful or derogatory. Right. I know it didn't sit well with me. And then also there was the writing on the wall that the community can be a little bit sensitive at times. It's probably not your best course of action to be doing that type of stuff. Just a little sage advice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about that because I don't run a meme account. I'm barely on social media as it is. And usually, guys, it's only through our social media. It's like if you see my little dollar bill sign on the comments, it's Schmitty. But yeah, it's very infrequent that I'm there. But it's just like you're right. The few times that I am on there's a lot of meme accounts popping up. And again, no shame in the game. Obviously, that there's people who want to create content and put it out there, which is a good thing. But sometimes it can get a little stagnant when everyone's kind of saying the same thing, and that's kind of the trickiness about the industry as it is, because like we get these like bursts, And it was kind of funny. I was talking to my friend Lorenzo over at the Blunt Instruments podcast and his account Omega Bond Watches. If you don't follow him or listen to Blunt Instruments, go give them a follow as
Yeah, he's
well
a good
because they're
dude.
good people. But they just had an episode where they kind of talked a little bit about this, that like so many content creators are like created when like a Bond film is coming out, and all of a sudden like once the film is gone, like they all just like disappear. It's like, do these guys just like fall off the face of the earth? Because like you just run out of content, right? And so very few content creators can keep creating content in lieu of the movie that's out, right? Like there's no more clothes, there's no more, leaked photos, there's nothing else to kind of hype it up because the movie's already out. So like, what do we do now? And so they're kind of talking about this is like, do you guys have no more original ideas? Like there's nothing else. Like when somebody else posted, an N Peel sweater, like you had to like repost it 6 times to like get your thing up. But like, what do you do after there's nobody else posting, right? Like, how do you continue the story? Anyway, it's kind of funny that there's parallels here, but the point is, it's like with the watch industry, we get those same type of bursts, right? Like all the watches come out at the same time, everyone's covering the same stuff, and it's always at like the same time every year, kind of. So it gets stagnant. I get it, but just try to be original as much as you can. That's it.
Yeah,
There are other funny things.
yeah. And I'll be honest, I really I don't follow a lot of horology meme pages. I just don't, for those reasons I talked about earlier. If I do, it's usually because I enjoy like their unconventional humor
Yeah.
instead of like the cookie cutter jokes. Right? You need some layers. You need a little complexity, a little range.
Yeah.
Right?
You're like an ogre, which is
Yeah.
also like an onion.
Yeah, correct.
Onions have layers.
Yeah, I feel like like among the ones I do follow, I feel like probably Watch Humor does a pretty good job of that. He does some like off the wall stuff without being too on the nose.
Yeah.
Um, it is too bad he can't find a co-host though. He had a post where he said he should have started a podcast like the rest of us, but it's a shame. I guess can't all just talk about all the same stuff all the time.
It's true. It's true.
But
Sorry, there's not another Schmidt out there watch humor.
that's
Sorry
it.
for everybody.
But memes they've come a long way. I've managed to worm my way into a blog to watch somehow. I've been in Everest Journal a couple times. Got on Jenny L. That was cool. One day I was like, where the hell all these followers come from? Oh, all right.
You get on Jenny L?
Yeah, I was in one of her videos where she was talking about being jaded in watches, and one of her things was like when you start to get tired of things, and she's like, and then one day you wake up and she's like, you stop laughing at the stuff that Bro Dinky puts out. And I was like, all right, respect.
How did I miss that?
It was a few months ago.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
that was
missed
a
that.
fun little tribute. But that was cool.
That is cool. That's cool.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good segue into video content, though. I will say.
See, I jumped the gun with wristwatch arrival, man.
It's okay. I had him on my list, so that's fine.
Oh, okay. All right. I had to beat you.
I can't lie. I'm not a huge YouTube watch personality person. Like I don't go on there for individual people per se. I'm much more into the watchmaking stuff or the, I guess, informative videos or like some cool niche content. Like I had Wristwatch Revival. There's also Watch Repair Channel. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're pretty good.
Yeah, I think I have a few of their videos.
Yeah, a little quiet music going. Guys doing
yeah.
Always cool. Always cool. Then you have like your Watch Finder.
Yep. He's on my list for sure. And I would say if I really had my druthers, it'd be Watchfinder pre 2018, before they merged with Richemont, because it was a little bit more honest, right? Like they were an independent company in the UK, servicing and reselling watches, and then they got bought out by Richemont, and now Big Brother kind of controls them. So there's that aspect that they're pushing things to be more salesy, but certainly before 2018 when they really kind of got started. It was just great informative content. Like I will never forget one of the first Watchfinder episodes I saw where he literally crushed a sapphire crystal for an Omega Speedmaster and compared it to a Hesalite crystal, and like how it was like with impact damage and like how is it easy to scratch, like all the stuff that when I used to sell watches was always very hard to explain to a client. Like,
Yeah, that's hard to
this is,
quantify.
and this is like, here, just watch this video. This video will tell you everything you need to know. And this dude's literally smacking a sapphire crystal with a hammer on the TV. And I'm just like, this is what I came to YouTube for, ladies and gentlemen. This guy is bringing the fire. But still, even still to this day, the guy makes great videos. And one of the things I really appreciate about his account is he always talks about esoteric watches that would normally not get another passing glance by anybody else, but he's going to talk about it. So I love it. And he's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, and then you have like your Tim Masso watches tonight. He does. I got to mention on that one time as well. Not intentionally. This was actually a funny story. Somebody in the comment section popped up and said, the only people whose opinions I value are Tim Masso and Brodinky. And he read it and he didn't know who I was and he thought it was a typo. But I thought that was pretty funny.
That is, you should see if you can find that episode and just screen grab that, just have it on loop on your page.
Well, my friend's a huge Tim Masso fan, and he said that to me, and he's like, "Dude,
oh, that's funny. That's funny. Maybe for Halloween we should all wear lime green Oakleys on our head.
Yeah, why not?"
Yeah, you know what? Shout out to you, Tim. Tim again is another guy that's just authentically extremely knowledgeable. He talks a mile a minute, but the guy knows his stuff and he really can speak well to watches. So somebody that's certainly worth following. For me, when it comes to editorial content, again, we mentioned Wristwatch Revival. Certainly good guy over there, Marshall. But another one that I really enjoy watching, other than Watchfinder, is Alexander Lintz from Watch Advisor.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow him or have watched his videos. He's a kind of newer page. I think he came out like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Really started gaining traction, I think, in 2020. But one thing I like about him is because he's, European and he lives over there on that side of the world. He's like friends with all these watch people. And so he just like goes to the factories of all these watch companies and just
it's pretty sick.
He's doing hands-on product presentations with like the director of product development for these brands. Like that to me is amazing because you're getting firsthand experience about specs and about technology, things like that, that a lot of times get lost in translation, literally lost in translation when it comes for like a press release, right? Like if you ever worked in the watch industry and you see like when Houdinki gets an article written or a blog to watch, whatever, they get a press release. And sometimes brands will give them a more in-depth press release over another company so that when they release everything, everyone's saying something, but Houdinki gets a little bit more to say, or Blog to Watch gets a little bit more to say, or Time and Tide gets a little bit more to say, just based on relationships, right? Excuse me. But that said, like, he's there covering all this information in real time. And a lot of times when this information is written and it's posted on a blog format, somebody has to sit down, manually type all these things out, and some things can get lost, or they decide it's not really worth covering in the article, and so they leave it out. So for me, being able to watch a video and have somebody like Gregory Kissling, who's one of the heads of product development at Omega, literally tell me how they made a bronze gold alloy and like what it does, that is very insightful and extremely informative for me. You know what I mean? It's like a science lesson from the guy that developed the watch. I mean, like, who wouldn't be excited about that? And then Alex will do his own little kind of spin where he covers everything just to make sure all the, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and everything like that. But for the most part, he lets these brand representatives tell the story, which I think is very cool. And there's just not a lot of pages out there that can do that. And you have to understand why. Just there's geographic reasons, there's cultural reasons, there's proximity reasons, things like that. But he's able to bring that to us. And I think he does it in a format that's extremely not pretentious. He seems like just a genuinely passionate guy about watches. And I think that's why his page is continuing to grow. I love watching his content. I think it's really great. So Alexander Lintz, if you ever were to listen to this podcast, my friend, keep kicking butt because you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I think probably the last person I would mention that is, I'm sure you've seen him, Mark. He does Hidden Gems.
I don't know if I've actually covered
Crown and Caliber.
Oh, yes,
Bigger
yes, yes,
dude.
yes,
Yeah, he
yes,
does
yes.
hidden
Okay,
gems,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I know he's listened to the show at least a few times. So if you're listening, hey Mark, keep up the good
Hey,
work.
buddy. Yes, okay, I know
But yeah,
exactly
it
what
was
you're talking
actually
about.
my friends were actually talking about this yesterday. They're like, oh, I really like that guy's content. He always has some like off the grid type stuff to bring up, which I'm a big
I mean,
fan
it's
of because
that.
I don't really love all the mainstream watches being thrown in my face
Yeah,
all the time. So to have some cool stuff that maybe you weren't thinking of or maybe you didn't consider, I'm all for that. So that's kind of up my alley.
yeah. I
Um,
saw I saw a video that he did where he covered the Omega DeVille Hour Vision, which is like if you know anything about Omega, like from a mainstream perspective, like that's not a watch you would probably ever hear about ever because it was totally a commercial failure for the brand.
I
Um, but it's a really cool watch. Have you ever seen one, bro, in person? The
have
Hour
not.
Vision.
I have not.
So this is a really unique watch, and maybe will turn the tide of popularity for Hour Visions. This was the first watch to debut Omega's in-house movement when they started reproducing them in 2007, and they debuted this watch with the caliber 8500, which is like the first coaxial movement, but in-house, had all these crazy technologies, silicon balance spring, all these things. But the Hour Vision was the first watch to really launch this collection. And back in 2007, this was a $7,000 Omega. Like this was a
Yeah.
very expensive Omega. Obviously, the clientele market was not ready for that price, but it needed to be that expensive because of all of the R&D that went into it. But what made this watch cool is it came in stainless steel or precious metal, and it has a fully sapphire inner case. Okay. So the reason why they called it the Hour Vision, it was kind of a play on words, right? Like this is our vision as a brand for the future of Omega, but they spelt our vision
With
with
an
an
H.
with an H, right? Like so it's like hours, like in time, right? But they also alluded to the fact that you could literally visualize the movement that this watch is now showcasing through the actual case. So literally, you have a regular dial, you flip the watch over, you have an exhibition case back. But the side profile of the watch on either direction and between the lug spacing is a sapphire crystal. So they
Wow.
made a sapphire case and then covered that in steel or in gold, but allowed the watch to be completely translucent on the sides. So you can literally see the rotor swinging around from the side profile of the watch as you wear it. It is the most gangster flex ever in the most subtle way. And Mark covered this on an episode of Hidden Gems. And I was just like, thank you. Because this was, again, this is a watch that for most people, they would never, ever, ever look at purchasing. But it has such a cool story. It's very representative of the future of what Omega was to become. And we're certainly looking forward to the success that we know the brand is garnering today. So, Mark, keep doing you, boo.
And then before we leave video, I would just like to say two things I cannot stand: celebrity watch spotting. I have
Oh,
grown so
yes.
averse to that. I'm just so tired of seeing what celebrities wear, nor
It's
do I
like, guys,
care.
it's like we know Marky Mark's got a Tiffany blue 5711. Like, I don't care. I'm not going to get one. I can't afford it. I'm not special. LeBron, same thing. Like, I don't care. I don't care if Ellen has a rainbow Daytona. Don't show me. Like, nobody cares. These
And then
people are untouchables.
the only thing I dislike more than that is unboxings. Can't stand them,
Really?
dude. I stop wasting my time. I don't need to see you take a watch out of a box. Oh, look, it comes with a spring bar tool. Ooh, this is a nice little NATO. But if I really cared, I would go buy one. I don't care what comes in the box.
Oh, bro, you're so jaded. You're so jaded.
This is like those videos of little kids playing with toys. I don't want to watch this.
Hey, you watch your mouth. That kid's making
That kid's
gajillion
making
dollars.
bread.
What's his name? Kevin or
I
Kyle
don't know.
or
My son tries to watch it, and I put the kibosh on it.
yeah, I will not let my daughter watch that because
I
I
don't
mean
need
that
that
kid's just
level of
selling
envy.
toys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kid's just selling toys for everybody. I think it's Kevin.
I don't know
Kevin
what his
reviews
name is,
who
but
so,
he's
somebody who
crushing
listens
it.
to this podcast that has kids will know exactly what we're talking about. But yeah, I'm with you on the unboxings. I think 10 years ago they were really cool, because there was a mystique of like, a lot of brands were up and coming. A lot of brands didn't really have the exposure that you have now. And so, packaging was I feel like packaging was one of the first things that started coming out with watches that really kind of just set brands apart from one another. You know, it's like, okay, look, here's the watch, but look at the cool box and look at cool all the accessories. And everyone was really focusing on the packaging. Oh, it comes in like a little scuba dive tank. You know, like it was kind of that idea that it was just like, let's throw kind of like more cool stuff. You know, I remember some of the early Worn and Wound videos, like where they had watches that looked like they came in like shipping containers or like, you know, like cargo boxes, you know, and they would
Yeah,
like
the
slide open.
Citizen ProMaster comes in like that.
Yeah, it's a
What is
diving
it?
tank.
Tank. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a diving tank, scuba tank. So things like that, you know. Um, but we don't need to see it anymore, guys. Like we know. We know.
A lot. I've been told by people that they literally just do it for clicks. It gets a lot of traffic, is what I was told.
Really?
Yeah,
Is
for
it
me,
it's
that's
it's
like
the algorithm boost?
that is the exact opposite reason. I mean, that is the busy work content I was talking about. No, thank you.
Yeah. It's like just show us the watch on the table. Take your 25-minute video and cut it to 5.
Well, then you're not going to get the ad revenue.
The algorithms, bro.
Yeah.
I YouTube has ruined everything. Gotta have
Alright.
the ad revenue.
So going from, I guess, video to audio. Strangely, podcasts I do not have the same feelings about as I have towards video. Right?
Okay.
I'm there for the watches, but I also enjoy a good conversation. I
Yeah.
like a little bit of a mix. I like some good banter. I like a fun tangent, a crazy story. I like it. I think that it makes conversation interesting. I don't need just facts and specs and call it a day. Obviously, we've mentioned a lot of our good friends on the pod before, but in addition, I guess for as far as informative pods go, I think 40 and 20 does a great job with this. And Everett, if you're listening, hello. They do like very deep dives into things, like they've done, and it's commonplace things like Vostok. It doesn't have to be something outrageous, you know, which is which is a lot of fun. And I guess other ones for just as far as like banter and shooting the breeze. I've always liked Two Broke Watch Snobs.
They have a good thing going.
They also do something similar, but they do watch brands they know nothing about, which is cool because you wind up learning about brands that you never cared about before. Like you hear a lot about stuff like Mito and just less mentioned stuff, which I do like. That's always fun to hear about.
Good old Mito. I'm a fan.
Yeah,
that is a watch brand that like nobody in the United States really cares about.
Well, I mean, they even did like Hublot, I think, which is always at the butt of everybody's jokes. But
Hublot is such a weird story, man. Like that, how that brand is like how Beavers say that brand is just insane. But
and then it winds up in a Jay-Z song. I don't know if you ever heard that. Yeah, Hublot call it Tebow.
Yes.
Yeah, that was.
I think, and that was he said strap that thing with the gator band or something like that.
Yep.
I remember that lyric, and I remember because I was like getting the watches at that time. Oh man, yeah, that was.
I was like, oh, Gator Band, Florida Gator Band. I get it.
Yeah, hey, on the little, not quite on the nose, but still on the nose. It was on the nose for all the watch geeks. Like we're like, oh yeah.
I wasn't a watch geek. I just knew you put an alligator band. Actually, I knew you put an alligator band on it because I went to Mont Blanc with my friend and the guy snobbed us. That's why I knew there was an alligator band.
Oh no! You guys were poor. That's why he could smell the pour on you.
It was.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, as far as other podcasts go, I mean, obviously we have our ladies at 10 and 2. We miss you guys, so you know, there's that. Lorenzo's podcast from time to time, Blunt Instruments, they do cover watches on there, and Lorenzo's kind of the resident watch expert.
He's like
on
the
that
bridge
podcast.
between 007 stuff and watch stuff.
Yeah, it's so they do several episodes. They have done several episodes where they talk exclusively about watches. You know, he's very well informative. So although it's not a dedicated watch podcast, they have a great thing going over there at Blunt Instruments. So give them a follow as well.
Yeah, and I guess aside from that, I guess if you want to go to photo, I mean, photo. When I first got into this hobby, I was really grabbed by the photography.
Yeah.
And it's still good. It's not that it's gone down in quality. I just feel like, I guess because so many people have caught on, or there's so many additional accounts, or there's so many amateurs who have sort of put together the winning formula that it's gotten very common. Because I remember I
Yeah.
used to be like blown away, and now like I feel like a lot of people use the same tricks where they have the floating watch in your hand, you got the cork underneath the watch makes it stand up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not that it's not cool. I feel like I've just become sort of
Is that how they do it? It's a
desensitized to it.
cork
I've seen, not for the floating watch, but for when you have like the watch that looks like it's, I don't know,
elevated,
yeah,
right?
elevated, but it's just like standing on a table. I've heard you put a champagne cork behind the watch to make the
That makes
bracelet circular.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But
Huh.
I know I guess I still prefer maybe wrist shots to fancy photos with coffee beans and stuff. I guess just because it's people in the moment. Like I don't like the
Yeah,
two stage wrist shot, but like the people in the moment, like, oh, this is a really cool thing I'm doing, and they get a good capture. Like I find that interesting. A little bit of a human element.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, I will say this though, out of everybody that does photography for me, I know he's becoming way more mainstream now, but my good friend Dagbert,
Yeah,
Zach Pena, that guy, when you go into his page, and he's a professional photographer, like that's
you
what
can
he
tell.
does. It's his personal bit, and he is a business now. Like he has his own media company, and he does stuff like that. And he's a freelance photographer based for his media company. He's working with a lot of brands, but his video, his photography and stuff has its own distinctive style. Like I know he's done stuff for toppers. I know he's done stuff for like people in California on the West Coast and things like that. He's done stuff for physical brands for their promotional stuff, but he has a very distinctive style that I notice it right away. When I see a photo, I know it's him. I'm like, hey, I know you took this photo. He's like, yeah, it's me. But it's just like his stuff is good, man, and he's a solid dude. Him and I have interacted on multiple occasions. We've met in person before back in the day, and if you don't follow his page, go give it a follow because his stuff is awesome, and he's got a very distinctive eye for things that are they're trying to be different. Like he takes a lot of good photos, but these photos are different than what I would normally see. And I love the way he's able to capture watches in full essence because he makes a lot of stuff beautiful. It was funny. I was at a watch meetup one time, and this guy walked in, and he was looking at we were talking about Omega, which is no surprise. And he walks in and he's like, "Hey man, so like, have you seen that new Omega?" And this is when the ceramic titanium diver 300 meter came out.
Yep.
And I was like, yes, man, this watch is amazing. Like, I love this watch, and this is so sick. He's like, if I had $8,000, I'd buy one right now. He's like, yeah, me too. And he's like, this is the photo I saw. And he like held up this photo. And it was one of Zach's photos that he took for like a brand that was doing like a NATO strap or something like that. And he
Crazy.
he put it on this watch. And he says, I want this watch and I want this strap. Because I don't care what it costs for me to have it. Like, this is what I want. I immediately texted him. He's like, tell that guy I said what's up. I was like, your watch photo for a completely unrelated account is over here selling Omegas.
Doing work.
And yeah, I mean, but it's his stuff is good. So if you don't give him a follow because his content is awesome. So
Yeah.
shout out to you, Zach.
It's almost like when you have your own like signature type of thing.
Yeah,
Like he's got his own.
it's a style, man. It's just like the way he does the saturation, the lighting, the colors. It's very dynamic. It's very good, and his photos are just like, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain. When you see it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. They're just crisp and clean, and he's not using a lot of like the Instagram edits. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like he's taking professional, high quality photos for marketing purposes. And it's just a next level tier. So, but the guy's awesome, and he's a good dude. So he's good watch fam. He's good people. So definitely give him a follow and hit him up. He's a good dude.
Yeah, and I don't love the overly staged photos, but I do like the accounts that sort of tie in other stuff too. Like I guess what the word is bon vivant, which I learned from my friend Greg over at Spirit of Time podcast. It's basically like somebody who appreciates finer things, and I feel like a lot of those things tie in with watches. So like how people do watches and cars, people do watches and coffee, people do
Mhm.
EDC, right? It doesn't really
Okay.
matter
Huh.
what you're into.
I've never heard of that term
Yeah, the
before.
word bon vivant is the term.
So it's
But,
basically complementary items that you could use as like backdrops or
well, I
or
think it's just
staging?
it doesn't necessarily have to be in photography. I think it's just something that goes along with.
I gotcha.
Like Greg actually runs an account called Time and Tequila, so his would be spirits in that case. But
Okay. Yeah.
but
Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that was him.
yeah, Time and Tequila is Greg from Spirit of Time, so that's cool. He's got his own
Makes
little
sense.
thing going on. Passionate about agave, but
Yes.
but I like the twist. I like how it kind of works in a little personal touch and also just other, I guess, aspects that people can rally around. You know, you meet other people. Oh, you're a big bourbon person. Oh, me too. Let's talk. It kind of opens the floor up a little bit to connect to people a little more, which I also like.
Yeah.
You know, some people are gun people, some people are knife people. There's a whole world out there. Right? You got artists and everybody's getting involved now. But I do like that. Those sort of tie-in pages that'll do a duo of effects once in a while. It's not just straight watch every time you scroll down the feed.
I miss the 2010 days with just all wrist routes, dude. Just
and horrible, right? Horrible.
And everyone just taking blurry out of focus.
iPhone cameras were terrible, and you couldn't focus, and
overly saturated wrist to the wind, dude.
Too many filters. Everything's jacked all the way up.
When everyone was still using filters, like I just remember the good old days, you know, like oh man.
My favorite was when people used to turn up
simpler back then.
When people used to turn up the what is it? It's not the sharpness. It's whatever one. It's like the maximum texture.
Oh yeah.
And you can always tell because their arm hairs would be like
so coarse black. Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. It was like Juno filter and like extra sharpen.
Yeah,
like everyone was rocking that, dude. Back in the day, 2010, simpler times.
Yeah. I used to do the same thing with my food pictures. It was hysterical. Looking back, I see some of them like these were awful.
I mean, when I would go back and look at like some of my old Instagram photos from back in the day, you know, when I had my personal account, like just like how did I post
like who am I fooling?
It's like how did I post this? Like is this real life? Like this is horrible. This is horrible. Oh man. Simpler times, my friend. Simpler times.
I mean, I know there's probably a ton of other content out there too. I mean, that's probably all I can think of. I don't know if you got anything else on your end or your list.
Oh man, that's it. I mean, again, a lot of stuff that you know you and I share. There are similarities with regards to like the stuff that we look at and stuff we follow. But hopefully, if you guys don't follow these people or don't already expose yourself to them, go give them a like, go give them a follow, go give them a sub if you feel inclined to. These are good people and they're good content creators and certainly somebody that should be touted and should be given a little bit more voice and platform.
Go show them some love.
Go show them some love, man. That's all we ask. And if you feel so inclined, give us some love too. Yeah,
we're not always negative on Wrist Cheese Radio. Okay,
we're not
mostly.
Oh man, these old photos are so bad. Never go back in your timeline, guys. Oh, what was I thinking? On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we bid you adieu. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Wrist Cheese Radio Podcast. Bro, we'll see you next time.
It's been a pleasure. Peace.